Hello, everyone. You're listening to Speaking of Art School, an oral history project created to perpetuate the legacy and culture of the San Francisco Art Institute.
I'll just say my name is Tom Houston, and I am the host of this series, Speaking of Art School. I am an alumni of the San Francisco Art Institute, class of 1984, BFA painting. And today I'm interviewing Ruth Chase, painter who lives in Nevada City, California, class of, I believe, 1990. And this is exciting. So on that note, Ruth, I just want to thank you for doing this. And I think maybe we'll just start from the beginning. If you could talk a little bit about, I know you're from Venice, California. You grew up in Venice, California, but tell us a little bit about your life before SFAI and how you discovered it. And we'll just go from there.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I grew up in Venice, California. I was born in 1965. My first home was on the boardwalk, though I lived so many places that I went to 13 schools before I graduated high school. But most of them were between Santa Monica and Venice and throughout the LA school district. Let's see, I was raised with a single mother, and I was a welfare child. And my mom, something that was unique, and I think that it contributes a lot to my creativity as a plus, was growing up with somebody who didn't read or write, somebody who didn't drive a car. And so I don't know. I mean, growing up in Venice, I never realized how unique it was. This is an odd thing to say. I went to the Art Institute at the point I went there. It was the first time out of Venice that I realized that I was raised in such a unique environment. I didn't have any idea the impact that growing up in such a raw place would have on me as an artist.
Right.
So yeah, so growing up in LA in the 80s, I mean, I was at Cathay de Grande and doing my best to keep up with the punk rock movement there. I spent my pre-adult years, with a fake ID, getting into every club I could get into. And then eventually that kind of led to some pretty heavy drug use. I think I tried everything, and I'm lucky that I didn't kill myself.
Yes,
So
indeed.
yeah, so that's kind of like the basics of where I was at. Just growing up in Venice was pretty fucking crazy, I can tell you that.
Right.
Especially
Absolutely.
during the 80s, where it was a little crazier everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. So then what? Then you discovered art school somehow. And
Yeah.
did you know before you discovered SFAI, which we've talked a little bit, and your story is awesome, I think. And did you know before you discovered SFAI that you wanted to pursue the life of an artist somehow or other?
Well, yeah, actually, no. Okay. So when I found myself I was using drugs, and I was smart enough to understand that for me, using drugs was what I called the waiting room. I had a lot of pain from my childhood and things that I hadn't had the tools to process. So when I really took a close look at my family and what I needed, what I kind of took from that was that I needed an education, that was the one missing piece, that really right out of high school, I saw my only opportunity for a next step was not a career, it was to get pregnant. And I mean, I might even go so far as to say, like, get knocked up for a state of purpose.
Right.
Yeah. And so what I did is I went to the local Venice library and I looked up art schools. I thought, well, I'm not really smart. I can't read and write very well. They barely let me out of alternative high school when I graduated like a year and a half late. So what can I do? And I thought, okay, well, I could probably do art. I mean, you know, who can't do art, right? At least they won't require me to read and write and spell correctly. So anyhow, I enrolled in a drawing class at SMC, Santa Monica College. And funny enough, I mean, that was probably the most I ever learned about art. I had never picked up a paintbrush. So let me catch my breath here. I'm all excited.
That's great.
Not
Oh my
because
gosh.
I'm talking, but because I'm nervous.
Well, it's all good. It's all
Yeah.
good.
So I calm down, Ruth. Get into your center. Okay. So what I did is I was enrolled in Santa Monica College. I was taking a drawing class and I went to the local Venice library and I looked up art schools in California. And so I thought, okay, I'll apply to these art schools. So I literally got the applications. I don't know if I had them mailed to me or what, but I couldn't take them home and have my mom help me with them. So I remember literally with pencil and then erasing in pencil. And I didn't know how bad I was at spelling because compared to what was at home, I was the one that was able to read and write comparatively.
Wow.
So I
Yeah.
filled out these 3 applications, like to SFAI, the school in Pasadena. I'm trying to think of the 3. I picked the top ones, right? And I had very little art experience, like I hadn't painted or anything. But so I applied to them. Then I found myself with an interview at SFAI. That was the first one that responded. I don't even know if the other 2 even responded. They probably did, but this is how the story goes in my mind. So I only look back on my application now years later and think, fuck, wow, they must have thought, whatever's going on with this application, we got to check it out. So I took my drawings from my drawing class at Santa Monica College. And I remember going into the school. I'm like, wow, I had never even visited the school prior to my my appointment. So, and I got one of those little black binders with the little tie on top because I had someone who was an artist in my life kind of help guide me. So I go into the administrations and it was a woman. I don't remember who she was. And she looked at my portfolio and she went out of the room. And she came back and she said, I believe it was right there on the spot. She said to me, your portfolio is enough to get into the school. Now, either they were desperate or when I look back on my portfolio, I'm like, it was so fucking demented. I'm like, that's probably why, because you could see that all the shit that I had in my head, all the trauma and stuff, it was all in my work.
That's awesome. And what year was that about?
That was like in 1984.
Right.
So I started SFAI in 1985 as a painter in the painting department. And as I told you is when we were talking before, for me, the Art Institute was a drug rehab program. I didn't really, I was just trying to find my way out of the situation I was in. And I just figured that going to college was a good idea. And I was doing whatever I could. Like I had no emotional attachment to being an artist. I didn't know who Manet or Monet was. I didn't know who Van Gogh was. I've heard of their name, but I had no idea. So I started my drug rehab program in 1985 and I've been clean since.
Oh my gosh.
It worked.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it
That
worked.
is awesome. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So, yeah, so then I found myself in this big badass art school, and being nothing but weird and strange myself, had no fucking clue what I was doing. I had never picked up a paintbrush.
Mm.
Um, it was the weirdest thing. It's like I put myself on another planet.
Right.
So,
Right. Oh man, that's incredible. I mean,
yeah.
your work is very impressive in my opinion now, and it's just amazing to hear how that's how you started. You hit the runway with no landing gear, you know, and
Yeah.
but yeah, but
Yeah,
but that's awesome.
it is interesting that what is it, like 30, 35 years later, I'm still working at it. And it turned out that I was more of an artist at heart than I knew. That I realized.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So did you feel like you got encouragement, or how was your experience bouncing around in the painting studios and other classes at SFAI when you were finding your way?
Yeah. Well, the SFAI was a great place for me because I was raised completely off the grid. So if I had been in an environment that was more formal, I never would have lasted. In fact, staying there for 4 whole years was probably the hardest thing I'd ever done at that point in my life. Be committed to something. But I think the American students were harder for me than the teachers and the institution. I came from a very crazy background. And so I found myself in an environment where I was with my people in many ways, in terms of the environment was natural for me.
Right.
But some of the students were this is a weird thing to say. I don't even know if it's true, but it's how I experienced it, is the students, I found them more mainstream than I was, right? So it's the first time out of Venice. It was the first time I was ever in an environment that was outside of where I grew up. So it was harder to deal with some of the students than it was, but I wasn't there to make friends. I didn't have a social life. I mean, I literally dedicated 4 years of my life, and I just had my head to the grindstone. I was in the painting studios for 10, 12 hours a day, and on weekends too. I mean, I just stuck to it. I dug in.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And the instructors were great. I mean, being in art history with Fred Martin was great. I remember him cursing and calling some woman in a painting slut and whore and stuff like that. That totally captured my attention, you know?
Right.
But I got mostly D's in my classes because, oh God, I have a good little ditty.
Yay.
I got mostly D's in my classes, except for in painting, because my reading and writing skills, I just recently learned, maybe from homeschooling about a couple years ago, how to put a paragraph together. Those things don't come naturally to me. So it's taken me a long time to figure it out, that like the way everybody else does it.
Right.
What was I gonna say? Am I rambling? We're good,
It's good.
right? Okay.
Yep.
So I was very fortunate to be there when Angela Davis was there. And I took philosophy with her, and I ended up in a subgroup, the history of feminism, which was actually, it's been part of my work since.
Right.
But I remember I bought this typewriter that could spell check, remember, because we weren't really doing work on computers at that time in 1985, 86, 87. And I could get all the words wrong with them correct spelling because I couldn't figure out what there, and there was.
Oh man.
So I remember getting a paper back from her, and she looked at me and she's like, I don't even know what to tell you. I don't know where to begin. This is how I remember it. I don't know where to begin. I don't know where to end. All I know is you don't know how to read and write.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
I can't accept this paper. I ended up doing okay in the class, and I remember everything I learned in that class. It was a phenomenal class, but even at art school,
That's awesome.
struggled with the academic side of it. Because a lot of people don't realize that in art, when you get a bachelor's degree, you still have to take all the same classes that other people do.
Exactly. Right.
So,
oh man.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Oh man. So what was I going to ask?
Do I get to ask you a question? Just
you
so
can
we
ask me anything.
They're on the timeline.
No, yeah, that's what this is all about. We can do anything we want. You can.
So Thomas, remind me what years you were there, because I think we overlapped at some point.
I started in 82 and I graduated in 84.
Oh, okay. So you were there right before I got there.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. And yeah, so we sort of missed each other.
Yeah.
But
I think caught up now.
But I think we had a lot of the same instructors from what I recall you're telling me before.
Did you? My very favorite class I ever took at SFAI was visual ideology.
Right. That class spun my head around because we had 3 teachers. And it was Raymondini, Zeus Papanicolaou, and Linda. Her name was Linda, I do believe.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like 3 classes in one, because there was lectures, there was reading, and all sorts of stuff. So anyway, it was it was like hanging on to a fast train. I was like, okay.
Well, that was my very, very favorite class. And the first time I took visual ideology, I got a D.
Oh, wow.
I was used to D's. It's just because I couldn't test well, and I didn't, my papers were awful. My ideas were there, but, I look back now and I realize how dyslexic and undiagnosed I was with some of the challenges I had. And at that time, you just like suck it up and go through it. So, so at the end of the class, I think it was Ray Mandini, but I said, I want to take the advanced visual ideology so bad. Please, please, can I take it? And I remember him saying, some kind of discussion that was like, you didn't even get a B. Like, this is advanced. You got a D and you want to go to the advanced class. And I'm like, you don't even know. Like, I was in the front row. I dream, I eat, I sleep, I breathe everything that we learned in this class. Right. I don't know how to tell you why I'm getting bad grades. So he let me in, and this class was smaller. So it was more of a round table group. And towards the end of I did my last paper, which I'm sure I still have somewhere on, oh my God, who is it? I'm spacing out on his name, who does the plates. And he was so hot on the scene at the time. He's a painter, but he does broken plates.
Julian Schnabel. Schnabel, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So Julian, I did this like fast food, like equating Julian Schnabel with drive-through McDonald's. And that was my, it wasn't a thesis, but that was my turn-in paper. And we were about to take the test or whatever it was. And this is how I remember it. And I said, please, please don't make me take the test. Don't make me take the test. Sit down with me and ask me about the class. And I swear, I'm so passionate. So he did. And that was the first time I learned about myself, is that even though I was getting D's, it was because I couldn't test. I didn't know how to test very well. And I
Right.
believe I got a good grade in that class. I mean, it was definitely a turning point in my life for understanding how I learn and process information and share it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I
That's
loved
cool.
that class.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot in that class. Diane Levitin was the other instructor.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't think
Diane.
I ever
Right.
had her.
Yeah, it was very cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's great. Uh, what else can we talk about? What were some of your I mean it's we've sort of talked about it a little bit already, but what were some of the that clearly was an aha moment for you, it
Yeah.
seems. But what were some of the other uh, sort of moments that of clarity
Yeah.
or not clarity, just chaos and clarity, just what were some of your other experiences?
Well, there's two kinds of things that I can answer that question with. The things that I look back and understand myself better now, looking back at that time, and the things that I understood then that I took with me. The things that I took with me was a very nonlinear education, which was designed for somebody like me. What I took with me is critical thinking. The painting critiques were badass and harsh, but I grew up in a harsh neighborhoods,
Hmm.
a harsh environment. So the critiques are deeply embedded in how I talk about art, how and I'm not saying that I took away with everything that I learned there. I've got my own opinion on things, but
Hmm.
the dialogue and the conversation, the exchange of ideas and how work is viewed. I love critiques. I will have them with my own work still. But the things that I took with me that I didn't realize until I looked back was, for one, I mean, my work still deals with women's issues. And that class that I took with Angela Davis, where I led this subgroup that was about the history of women, um, that's still a big part of my work. Um, and Yeah, and just the yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, the things that we're missing, um, it's kind of funny when I think about the things that didn't work out and the negative aspects of my experiences there. I felt like I don't know if it's a woman thing. It may not have been, but I felt like there was a group of people, and this is kind of normal in most in our culture, in most settings. There was a group of people who were tight with the painting instructors, and I could never crack that, um, what that was. I could never find, how to be cool enough or get in with that group. Um, and I was also too young and naive about the art world. Like I had no, why I was there. So I was very clueless during the time that I was there. So some of
Hmm.
the more advanced experiences and the deeper relationships that painting students had with their professors, or being in the studios, the special studios,
Uh-huh.
I was completely, I felt like that was a million miles away from me.
Right. Yeah.
Um, where
Right.
now, I mean, people take their friends with their Facebook friends with their teachers for years and go on
Hmm.
relationships. But
Yeah. Right.
yeah,
Huh. Yeah. Yeah.
but I suppose that's not what I needed at the time. I mean, what I needed is what I got.
Right.
And it was epic. I mean, my time at SFAI was, there's a lot to complain about,
Mm.
but overall, it was just a very um, magical 4 years of my life.
That's
It really
awesome.
was.
So when you exited, did
Yeah.
you feel like you had your feet on the ground
Oh, fuck
somewhat,
no. No.
or
I
you were
took
just
one, no. No feet
okay,
on the ground.
no
I
feet?
had no clue until about 10 years ago when my career took off what
Yeah,
it was I needed to learn in art school that I didn't learn.
yeah,
But no, I took a career class, so I knew how to do the portfolio. I was fresh out of SFAI and went back to LA. Galleries were very interested in interviewing me, and I've to this day never been in a gallery. I never got accepted. Any of the routes that I could have ever taken, I could not figure out how to like break
yeah.
into that.
Wow.
So yeah. But
Interesting.
yeah, I left SFAI totally unprepared, and um, their alumni connections. I just they sucked for
Oh
years,
man.
you know.
Wow.
But you know, Brianna was there. That was the first time that I made a connection with the alumni group, and then of
Mhm.
course now being a liaison
Yeah.
for the alumni. It's
Right.
great. You know,
Yeah.
I think that, you know, aren't we looking at organizations right now and really examining how they have failed us as
Mm.
in society and culture,
Mhm.
in our cultures these days? I think that that's just a natural process of evolution, and that it's a journey that the Art Institute is taking as well as everybody else is,
Right.
you know.
Yep.
I wouldn't, you know, sometimes the trade-off for a well put together organization that's got their shit together and everything's tidy and neat doesn't provide the same environment. And it wouldn't have provided the environment that I had in the 80s at the Art Institute.
Yeah.
It was messy, and part of that messiness is a huge part of what I took that was good as well as bad
Yeah.
or challenging.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I personally feel like anybody that's ever been a student there, uh, we all have like this bond of some sort, no matter how freaky or whatever. It's like if you were there, you got your psyche branded somehow, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And even no matter how different we all are, I think we have that sort of trial by fire in common, that initiation. And and it does seem to me that your experience there is something that you're not done when you leave the school. You know, it continues to unfold
Right.
in your life, and I've really been aware of that in my own experience, and especially getting involved in the Alumni Association. You know, it's like, this is fantastic. You know, so because like you, I was head down, focused on my stuff, and didn't participate in a lot of social stuff at school. You know,
Right.
so it's uh, it's a good thing we're here today. You know, and still
Yeah, I mean, even
doing.
though I didn't go to school with you, when I see you in the alumni meetings and the other people that are in the alumni meetings,
Yeah.
I can feel, like you said, a vibrational like
Hmm.
sameness, something that I relate
Yeah.
to. And I think one of the things that most people who were a good fit for the Art Institute, when you go there, you can feel like you're in a you. I mean, that was the thing. The environment was was the prize, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah. 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 I think it's that vibe, that messiness, that sort of free range.
Oh, inappropriateness, like
Yeah.
all of the things that life is really made up of,
Hmm.
right? Opinions and uh, living on the edge of not doing things the way they're supposed to be and figuring it out. Anyhow, it was very organic. It was a
Yeah.
very organic place.
Absolutely. Well, and it seems to me that's what creativity at its core is. It is. it's organic and messy and doesn't stay in the lines, necessarily.
Yes, out of the lines.
And so, which is why I think certainly SFAI isn't for everybody. I think it really pulls many people in, and I think it spits some people out,
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yes.
it's very sort of galvanizing that way. But I think that's the good thing overall.
Yeah.
That's what makes it such a unique place on this planet.
It makes you who you are as an artist. It definitely formed you. And then I think I feel like SFAI was like any relationship that was pivotal.
Yeah.
Like it's like a parent that you love, but then and they teach you everything you need to know to go teach yourself.
Right.
I have to tell you the quote that I live by, that I believe Carlos Villa told me.
Right.
But anyhow, and then you spend the other part of your life trying to undo some of the dogma so that you're even freer. But I believe it was Carlos Villa, because I took quite a few painting classes from him. And I think it was him who said this, but I've been saying it to myself. I live by this. The best teacher you will ever have is yourself asking the right questions.
Yep. That sounds familiar.
Yeah.
I had Carlos also, and that's great. Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Well, what else can we, so you had Carlos, who were some of your other favorite people that you worked with, either in painting or just in general, other classes or anybody? Or
I'm not very good at names, but for painting, it was Julian Hitofsky.
Okay.
And, Carlos Villa.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I tried to stay away from some of the teachers that were more intense. But
that was probably good. I mean, it's good to challenge
but
yourself.
I took photography, I took sculpture.
That's awesome.
Lots and lots of drawing. I spent my history credits on, I was fascinated, and thankfully, I mean, it's helped me understand through the years, African-American art history. They had some great classes there. And, Angela was there at a point teaching philosophy.
Right.
They've had some really interesting teachers there. And I don't think I had any teachers I didn't like.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, there were none that I loved them all, actually.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I had a few that were just kind of flat, but I didn't have anybody that I would say, like, I really hated that person or whatever.
Well, some people would call Julian Hitofsky flat, but he was great for me.
Yeah.
Did you ever take Julian?
Yeah, Julius was awesome. He was, and I think most people that took his classes, generally, from what I have gathered, he was the guy that he didn't say a lot, but what he said was awesome. And awesome. Wow.
Yeah, he had an exhibition, and I bought his book, which is Great Memories.
Yeah.
I hated his work when I was at the Art Institute. I'm like, who the hell does this? Who does this and calls it art?
Right.
Because I didn't know what art was, you know?
Man, that's
now
great.
I look at it and, he's passed on, but sometimes when I'm in my studio, I call on him spiritually.
Oh, good for you. That's fantastic.
Come on into my studio, because I understand your work, like why it was so valuable and important. Plus, he was a great teacher.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So,
yeah. Well, it seems to me that you've, from my observation, you've done great at having one foot always in your artwork. You've had a family, and you've really worked with your community where you live. And I think that's impressive,
Thank you.
And
I think the hardest thing, I never understood why it's so hard for women in the working world until I had a kid, and
Mm,
especially in the arts, when art can be an unpredictable income source.
yeah.
You become the sole caretaker of your child so the other person can support the family,
Hmm.
and it can take you away from your work.
Right.
So I had a 10-year break from from
Mm,
my work as a central focus.
sure.
And it was probably the roughest. It was hard, but
Uh-huh.
and I have a lot to say about that, but that's another interview. But
Well, that'd be good.
yeah.
Part two, because that, to me, I also, my daughter's 19, and I feel parenting is, uh, it's a very, it's one of the most intense creative processes, and it'll put you through your paces on every level, and you know, uh, so yeah,
Yes.
I think that's great. I think that's awesome. So what else can I ask you? What would you possibly suggest if you knew a young person and they said, Ruth, I want to be an artist, and what would you possibly suggest for them to do in terms of the possibilities? Um,
Well, art school does not make the artist,
yeah.
that's for sure. But art school can provide an environment uh, to make sense of the the spiritual space that an
Hmm.
artist resides in to make work.
Yeah.
But and I'm never one to prescribe a one size fits all for anything, but I would tell young Ruth, if I could go back
Hmm.
and say, darling, sweet, darling, lovely girl, once you kick those drugs, let me tell you what you need to do. You need to have two careers. You need to have one that pays you, and that that one that feeds your mouth and one that feeds your soul,
Right.
and make them both creative. So perhaps graphic arts or something that I could do. Uh, being a woman, being anybody, and not being able to pay your bills, and coming out of art school with the love and the desire and the appetite to create art that doesn't sell was harsh.
Mm.
So, what
Hmm.
I would say is find two professions, one that feeds your mouth, one that feeds your soul, and then never, ever, ever give up that the one that feeds your soul could be bigger than the one that feeds your mouth. So that's
That's
probably
awesome.
what I would say.
That's great. I agree. I I I totally agree. I totally agree. Uh, do you have other things that you like to do that are not necessarily art, but that help you to stay in your creative space? I mean, aside from actually making your art, like some people have meditations, or they like to jog,
Love
or
that question.
something that's not
Yeah.
painting, but that
Okay.
keeps you in your space.
Okay. I want you to answer this question too, because I'm really curious what you're going to say. Um,
Mm,
Oddly enough, given the way I started out, you would think I would, wouldn't you? But
mm,
the reality is, I am like, I live and breathe and only think about art.
yeah.
I look at art news, the crap that I have to look at. I mean, meaning that like the bullshit art world news, whatever.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, every newsletter about I'm like interested. That's what's so hard about living in a rural area. Interested. I don't want to talk about parenting. I don't
Hmm.
want to talk about the government. I don't want to talk about politics. I don't want to talk about the environment. I am only interested in art. So sometimes I feel like I'm either at, like you and I, Thomas, we could talk forever.
Right.
But if you're not interested in art, I probably don't have much, like I'm boring, right? I don't watch, I'm not into television shows. But I will say, and this probably does go back to why I started at the Art Institute, is that this sounds probably so gonna make me
Good.
sound bag, but all of this is my spiritual life. My spiritual practice is through channeling, and it ends up on the canvas. I mean, so the only thing outside of like art and art world and that kind of stuff is I could talk about one's identity that's steeped in their spiritual beliefs, belief systems. I just, that all of that, I read about it. So the books I choose, they're always about identity. They're always about spirituality. Right now I'm doing a 30-day prayer practice with a friend of mine who's in Mexico. And so it's all that. And so I am a mom, and I've learned how to be a mom, and I'm a good mom, a great mom who's made a lot of mistakes. But family life is something that brings balance to me, but I would absolutely not give any attention to if it wasn't so important. It isn't a natural place for me to dive in. I am easily secluded in my work.
Right.
I'm a workaholic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's yeah. I don't know. That's the answer. What about for you? Is there something outside? Come on, you go golfing. It's golfing?
Well, I think we're pretty aligned on the spiritual front. I've been a regular meditator for 30 years, and I also like to play music and journal. Yeah, I'm a journaler. I'm a writer.
Right.
My mom got my brother and I journals when we were teenagers, just for something to do in the summer, and I just kept going. Kept going with it, and so yeah. So I think the meditation is a great thing. I think for
And
me,
what does meditation look like to you? Is it an eyes closed, guided?
that's part of it.
Steeped in
That's
Buddhism,
part of it.
something like that?
Yeah, I think it can be, well, certainly, working, the physical work on my artwork I've always viewed that as a meditation. But the actual meditation that I was referring to, it is a sit quiet for 15 minutes every day and focus on your breath and let things just go. It can be anything, actually, for anybody. But I think it's more a matter of intention with it. What you want to, clear some space, turn off your brain, from your thoughts, and let things percolate that come in. But
do you get that when you're working on your work, your creative practice? Because to me, that is the same kind of channel for me.
Yep, I think so. Yeah. Yeah, when you're just in the flow of it, things come to you because you're not resisting anything, and you're open. And so my wife and I are also, for over 10 years, we've been involved in a traditional Hawaiian hula group here in Ashland. And so it's very physical, it's very spiritual, and it's very social, which reminds me of another question while we're here.
I have one more answer.
Oh, good.
There's an answer in me somewhere.
Yay. I love it. Yeah. I was just, yeah. Hold that thought. I was, or maybe tell me that first, because the next question
No,
is.
it's the answer to whatever question you're asking.
Oh, okay. I was just going to mention in this special time of the pandemic that we're in, how has that affected you and what you do and how you do it and with whom? And just because we're in a pretty unique time here, and what are some of the pros and cons and things?
Well, at the beginning of the pandemic, just like many artists, not all artists, I was polarized. I mean, if that's the right word.
Mhm.
I was in shock because I had just gotten off of a 4-year grant cycle where my work and my life has been dedicated to community and bridge building. And but also, if you've worked with grants, you're
Mhm.
very it's like a job, and so
Yeah.
there's less freedom. And I had just been in the midst of this really good momentum of finally painting paintings just for me and for my own work. So the pandemic put me in shock, like, fuck,
Right.
like, okay, I might not be going where I thought I was going to be headed. And so what that did is it caused me to just stop all work. Plus, along with everybody else, thinking about like just basic needs and sustaining and a daughter who was
Mhm.
in high school, just all of that stuff.
Yep.
But what I did, and I learned this from dogs. If you can't get a dog to eat and you give them one little morsel from your hand, it'll whet their appetite and they'll eat.
Right.
So, um, so what I did is and a lot of my work has to do with accountability and being visible and using social media to
Mhm.
create that visibility and that accountability so that it forces you to show up in the way that you intended. It's like having a force outside of yourself, greater than yourself,
Mhm.
that gives you a reason to show up. So I called my girlfriend Chantel, who's an artist, and she's awesome. And I said, hey, girl, what if we do these live Instagram and we commit to doing live Instagram? We'll just start talking about art. We'll figure out what's going to happen on Thursdays for 1 hour at 4 o'clock. And she's like, yeah, I'm totally up for that. So that was the little morsel that I needed. So we did this project. We came up with a project. We came up with materials. We invited the community of people watching to join the project. We used cardboard and, remember, these were things, we were still in lockdown, so
Yeah.
didn't really get stuff. Anyhow, what happened was once that project was done, I had whet my appetite. I went back into my studio and learned something I learned growing up in Venice. And that is, which it's funny how many times I've reverted back to this during this pandemic and even during the last election,
Mm.
that before this last one and this one too. There will always be distractions. There's always chaos and drama and things that feel like they're on fire outside your door. And God, this is going to sound it's going to sound however it's going to sound.
Yep.
But, and I hope I don't cry because I'm so emotional,
It's
but maybe
totally
I
okay.
will. I have this life, and in this life, no matter what is going on around me, I always have to make choices about what I want to experience, where I'm going, and what I'm going to allow it to do to me. And in the last election, because I was devastated, I said to myself, I just stopped listening to the news. That's what I did. I just stopped. And I went back into my studio and I said, I'm not letting this person or this circumstance take my life away. Because I remember growing up with that at home. It was like I could constantly be a triage to catastrophic events happening and never really step into my own life. Or I could step into my own life and recognize that it's just all going to still be there, and I can be part of it, but I can be part of it on my own terms. So when all of this happened, I just chose to stay in my own lane and recognize the value of my work. It might not be of anybody's interest at the time, but just to stay committed. And I can see what's going on over here and see what's going on over here, but there was still value in what I was doing, and to trust that path.
Mm.
And so what it did is it actually even made me even stronger, because this pandemic was harder for all of us.
Right.
I mean, if I didn't watch the news before, I was really harder not to watch the news during
Hmm.
this last 7-8 months.
Right. Right.
So and I trust that the work that I do in the world has value,
Hmm.
and that it needs to be done as well as all the other topics. I mean, of course, I thought, oh God, I need to have a pandemic response or a social justice response.
Mm.
And I thought, actually, I'm
Right.
already on task. Like, don't leave your station. We need people at all these different stations. Not everybody is
Hmm.
called to be political artists or social justice artists. There's so
Yeah.
many things that the world needs us to show
Absolutely.
up for. So that, and I've been like that. I mean, I think that I've had more work done in this last 6 to 8 months. Um, and the louder it's been, the more I've gone within.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's fantastic. I
Yeah.
mean, that's something, I don't know if uh, you can set that as an example for somebody else, but I don't know if you could teach somebody to have that, to do that, you know what I mean? Because that's so important, is to believe that what you're doing has value, no matter what it is, and that's awesome. Yeah. Hmm. Well, is there anything else at all you would want to talk about? I mean, I personally think that us
Mm.
doing this interview, this is super important stuff that we're doing right now. And kind of blows me away to think about the person I was when I was at SFAI, that I would ever be doing this right now is just mind blowing. So,
Well, I do, we're all, I'm sure we're in a wrap up phase of the interview, but interviews are a huge part of my work for the last 7 years.
mhm,
It's the way that I engage with community. And I use interviews to inform my work.
yeah,
And I believe that there are, in fact, I'm just launching this campaign now about, about the process of interviews. And so this is what I was going to say, is that when you have someone witness your life, it has a profound effect on the teller. That's what I call them, the teller,
mhm,
because the teller is releasing memories and insight and wisdom, but it also has an effect on the witness. The witness can then see themselves, whether it's the viewer or the interviewer, they see themselves in another person. And they also, not only does it build compassion and empathy, but it also builds and connection and community.
mhm,
But it also produces wisdom, where we learn from each other.
right,
The old oral tradition of storytelling.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
So I appreciate being interviewed because usually I'm not interviewed.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the interviewee.
Yeah.
I'm the witness,
You're the
not the
witness.
interviewer. Or
Yep.
I'm the witness, not the teller.
Yeah.
And so being able to sit here is, it's uplifting to be heard. It's uplifting to have someone interested in me.
Yeah.
Maybe secretly we're both parents, so you know how that goes. The
Yep.
show me years. Can you see me? Can you see me? Do you hear me? Do you see me?
Right.
So it's nice at this age to be witnessed. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. I mean, I really, really appreciate your doing this, with me. And, it's been immensely enjoyable and insightful.
Yay!
And I just think, I just think the first installment, is super successful. And
Good. I hope so.
yeah. So, well, good. Well, thank you so much, Ruth. I hope someday we get to meet in person.
Yes. I do feel a bit of a kindred spirit with you. Like if we come in pods with similar, characteristics,
Yeah.
I'm like, I think I'd probably be very similar to Thomas if I were a dude. The dude version of me.
That's right. The dude Ruth.
Yeah. Although I got a lot of dude in me already.
There you go. Well, it's good. It's like, I think I have a lot of chick in me. So, I think it's good. We have both of those.
I was
aspects.
Exactly. I don't know what my pronouns would be if I were into that, as if I were younger and that was my focal point. But
right. Exactly.
All good.
All right. Good. Well, thank you. And I greatly appreciate it. And
thank you, Thomas.
I'll see you. I greatly appreciate it. And we'll just see you on the social media.
On the other flip side.
Yes.
All right.
The other flip side. Thank you.
Much love.
Okay.
Bye.
Take care. Take care, Ruth.
You've been listening to Speaking of Art School, an oral history project created to perpetuate the culture and legacy of the San Francisco Art Institute. I'm your host, Thomas M. Houston. If you're an alumni of SFAI and would like to participate in this project, please contact me at thomasmhoustonartist@gmail.com. Please stay tuned for upcoming episodes, and as always, thanks for listening.